And hello, this is Chris Parker with the Business Simplicity Podcast. And I just had an amazing conversation with Luca Signoretti about agile leadership. And we got into points about, well, what is traditional leadership versus agile and principle-based leadership? What are some examples of how, there can be some significant suffering and stress in an organization, and a few very practical things to do to start moving forward into a new way of working together in an organization. So, hey, Luca, why do you think this would be really valuable for people to listen to this?
Well, Chris, I think this could, spark a kind of a self-reflection about the way we lead as a leader today, and starting really to to think about that maybe some of our attitudes and behaviors as a leader today are more an heritage of an old time that it is not here anymore, a time where everything was constant, problems were more or less the same, repeated themselves, so experience was very valuable. In today's reality, leader must be open to rethink its assumption. And so maybe this conversation could spark this kind of thinking in every leader. The idea is always to avoid that both leaders and people working with them suffer useless kind of bad situation because their evolution is not as fast as the evolution of the environment they are operating in.
And Luca, having been an executive in multiple global organizations like Unilever and Heineken, and also as a professor of leadership, we get into some of this in a really meaningful way. So,
the Business Simplicity Podcast, where we learn about strategies and tactics to succeed through simplicity, with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to the Business Simplicity Podcast. This is Chris Parker, and I'm having a conversation with Luca Signoretti, who is, amongst other things, a fellow consultant and coach in the Enablers Network. But way beyond that, he's been an executive in global organizations like Unilever, Danone, Ferrero, Heineken, and he's also a professor and has been a professor of leadership at a number of different universities, in addition to his own coaching practice. And we're going to get into, and I'm just delighted to get into this with Luca, agile leadership. And that's something, of course, that's close to my heart, having worked in many, what organizations called themselves agile, and having practices which were called leadership. And now we're trying to figure out how do we bring those things together. And one thing that I found really inspirational is the reason that Luca does this. His mission in life is very similar to some of my motivations, and we're going to get into that. I mean, how can we help fellow humans, suffer less in the workplace? And that's definitely possible. So, Luca, thank you so much for joining. Can you kick it off with, in your own words, between corporate leadership and being a professor of leadership, and coaching leaders, what is it that you yourself actually do? What do you do?
Okay, first of all, hi, Chris, and thanks for having me. Really appreciate this invitation. Well, what I do is and then we'll talk about that as you mentioned, is really try to help leaders to evolve from a traditional approach that is becoming more and more obsolete and damaging today to a more agile and principled leadership style. And what I'm doing to reach this kind of goal is work both as a university professor, so working with young leaders or future leaders, at the same time working as an executive trainer, educator with a more senior leader. So I try to cover both sides of the leadership, the future leader, because I want them to avoid to replicate what they see in their workplace, because unfortunately they're gonna start their career working with boss that have been raised with the kind of traditional methods, and if we don't stop them, they're going to replicate that. So as you mentioned, the suffering will keep on repeating itself. And on the senior side, I really want them to understand that there is no reason to stick to something that is absolutely obsolete now, and that is really, really limiting their potential and increasing their stress and suffering. So they can do something. They are absolutely able to if they want. Just a matter of abandoning some kind of old assumption and move toward a more agile way of thinking and doing, of course.
And can you, just to play with it, can you describe or compare and contrast traditional leadership with what you're calling agile or agile and principled leadership? What do you mean by traditional?
Well, that's definitely a good starting point. I was gonna make some kind of example that I start with when I try to explain what kind of transition we have to work on with leaders. Is that starting, for example, with the obsolete assumption, like that the traditional leadership, the leader is supposed to have all the answers. Okay, so you see a lot of leaders today, still today, the majority of them, then somebody comes to them with a problem, okay, they feel obliged to find a solution. Otherwise, they feel like they are not good leaders. And this is not the point. In this reality, crazy reality we are in, everything is changing so fast, and the complexity we are in, nobody today can have all the answers. But they still try to come up with answers. And so this frustration is enormous. They feel under stress. And of course, they don't have the right answer. They just come up with something. And this is not going to help them to advance or their team to have clearly more faith and I see their boss as some kind of reference. So this is one. Another one could be the fact that, for example, when they think about leadership evolution development, the leader in position say it doesn't think that he or she has to evolve anymore. It's more for their teams, for their people, that they have to improve things. So whenever we talk about leadership development, it's always about, oh yeah, my team needs to evolve. They are out of the race like they already arrived somewhere. They're not, of course. Everything changed. They must be probably the first to be involved in a kind of transition. So all this kind of thinking, and I can cite other tens of other obsolete assumptions, like being the most knowledgeable person in the room every time, and other things is impossible, of course. Probably some member of the team are more knowledgeable on new technology, new trends, new societal, things that are emerging from the society in terms of thinking or whatever, than the leader. And still the leader thinks that he has or she has to be the most knowledgeable in the room. So all these things are incredibly bringing pressure on them, frustration, and making their work incredibly hard. So
I love those two examples, because I think if the assumption is the leader needs to have the answers, then the anti-pattern to that is the assumption that the others don't. And I think and then if the assumption is the others need to be developed, and then the anti-pattern is the leader doesn't. And I love it because more and more we're seeing that people are aware that this needs to be flipped in a lot of cases. So I think, maybe not in every case, but we'll get into that. Is agile leadership always the answer? But let's leave that for later.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk about suffering, because if we're saying agile leadership is an answer to traditional leadership, and this will reduce suffering and stress, can you explain and what kind of suffering and stress you have seen and you're trying to resolve through your work? Like what's really happening out there in your eyes?
Yeah, well, the reason why I decided to made up my mind to become this focalize myself on helping leaders and to better manage this rapidly changing and disruptive time, is that I personally witnessed a lot of suffering, not physical suffering, of course, psychological suffering, when I was and during my 25 years of corporate life. So I started as a suffering, or let's say, if we could call it this way, as a team member working with a boss that was absolutely a great guy, very good leader, but still very much traditional. So whatever we have said before, it applies perfectly to him. And then I had other boss the same way, very good, very kind of very skilled leaders, but still very much traditional. So I was frustrated, and I suffer in a way that, of course, I couldn't express myself. That's the idea in a traditional leadership, where the leader tells you, the team, not only what is about to be done. So of course, this is part of the leader roles. So you have to work on this, and this is the outcome we are waiting for. But the famous how. So he really got, or she got, because I have already, of course, female leaders, a boss, and they got into details. Oh, you have to do this and this and this. Basically, I was only an executor. And as we know, and now much better than before, after a lot of study have been done, that intrinsic motivation are so important. So autonomy, mastery, etc. At the time, of course, were not known, and I was suffering. And then what I suffer also when I moved to the leadership role, I blindly replicate all this approach, and I suffer myself for the same reason we just said. Basically, I couldn't really find solutions sometimes, but I have this pressure to be the hero. So the famous role of hero leader that has to do everything by himself or herself, and know everything, be ready for everything. No, of course, this is impossible in today's reality. So from this both suffering, I came up with this kind of emerged with time. There's an strong impulse to say, no, I want to help both sides, starting with the leader, because if the leader is okay, the team members will be in a better place. So I have to start with the leader. That's, of course, leadership. And so I'm now focusing on helping them to transition for their good, because they're going to be more productive, less stressed, and less frustrated. That's the idea.
And I love it that you highlight that these leaders you've worked with are male or female, and you've experienced them to be very good, I guess, authentic, caring people. However, their skills and tactics and the methods of leadership sounds counterproductive, not only for them, but for their staff. And you mentioned that you were seen as an executor, and it's funny, I was explaining this to one of my sons in the car yesterday. It was a conversation about evolution, and he was wondering, and we got into the human evolution and the difference between physiological evolution and technology evolution. And got into the conversation of how management practices are basically a technology, and they can be changed, they can be learned. And if a previous type of leadership thought a person, a human resource, was simply a kind of a fleshy machine to do some work under instruction and don't think and don't come back, well then, if you think about that, but it's kind of obvious that the best solution won't emerge. Like if one person is telling 100 experts on how to do their job, it's not going to evolve very well. But for some reason, it's the shift it feels like it's slow and going. So what do you see on a macro level? Like, are you seeing more interest in adoption at an agile and principled approach over traditional, or is it still early days? Where do you think we are?
Well, first of all, the problem with agile is that it brings with it a little bit of problem with its origin. So the origin, certainly, Chris. That the agile movement started in the software development, so very technical environment, and then it moved to these agile teams. They are absolutely something incredibly powerful and working very well if left working the right way. But everything has been very operational. Okay, so when you talk about agility to leaders, most of them have still in mind the agile teams, or eventually, kind of agile to develop, product develop, whatever. And so very operational stuff. They say, okay, it's not for leadership. It's kind of project management. I don't care. Nothing to do with me. The point is that they don't understand that the concept or principle agile are not interesting just for the project management. It's indeed, the interest in the last 15 years has always been about, you know what, this principle are so interesting, the principle, not the methodology, the principle are so interesting to be adapted, to be responsive to the change in the business reality, that they should be absolutely adopted by the leadership. And what I insist always, that if it doesn't get to the leadership, the company is never going to be agile. Okay, there is a lot of talking about, our company is agile. And I ask, do the executive team works in an agile way? What do you mean an agile way? Well, I don't know. They do a revision of the resource allocation every 3 months, for example. Oh, no, we have the annual planning. That doesn't seem really agile. Do you spend time every executive team meeting to solve problems come after every, I don't know, every three months or 2 months from the agile team, so from the market? And they say, well, now that we work in exceptional just by exception. So basically there's a lot of talking, nothing happening. And so the tendency is that the agile is very operational. Few companies have understood that if we don't start from the top, okay, nothing is going to really being agile. So there are few champions, and this is good to say, that are really advancing that. And I have to say, most of the case, they are consumer company, and a little bit of, I don't know what is the experience. Chris and I are absolutely interested to know what is your experience. From my experience, are those who have a lot of pressure from the market. So those who have this kind of competitive pressure, like consumer company, financial companies, and of course, the tech, I don't talk about the tech, they already work this way by definition, they're native, so no problem about that. But apart from the tech companies, all the others are really slow in getting there. And so this is where the problem is, that if they don't perceive the need, of course, it's going to be a long way.
Yeah, let me jump in. I definitely see that more digital oriented startup scale ups are, because I think most of the people are technically oriented, they're aware of these patterns. So literally right now I'm working with an organization that is adopting SAFe, the scaled agile framework, for the entire company, executive team down, and following a lot of these patterns. So having not only their OKRs for the year, but matching that up to their, call them product or program increments, so every 2 or 3 months, and building in that review schedule, and even getting their sales and their support people into working in more of a Scrum or a Kanban way, but really building that in, so there's the accountability and the decision authority is delegated as far down as possible. Where I'm seeing it absolutely not work is in longer lived companies, so very established companies in markets that have healthy margins, meaning that the reason to change is low. Think about traditional banks. They talk a lot about agile, but it's agile in the basement. It's not agile in the boardroom. And I love some of those examples that you said is, are we planning 5 years, or are we planning 5 weeks? And having a planning backlog, and how are you actually sensing and responding, and where are the decisions actually made? It's I don't think Agile started in 2001 in Colorado with the Agile Manifesto, Colorado, Utah, or somewhere. A lot of the principles, I think, come from lean and just lean manufacturing and theory of constraints, because there's a lot of just common sense in there. And my dream has always been somebody applied it to development. And it wasn't the first time iterative dynamic development had been, it just got the name at that point. And I agree that agile is oftentimes thought of as, okay, there's something the developers do. And when I walk around, I say the developers may be working in a way inspired by Scrum, which is a working method with certain tools, but Agile is definitely a mindset. And when it doesn't work in the organization, it's pretty much because of the leadership level. And some patterns that I see is, in order for Scrum to work, there's a concept of limiting work in progress. Because if you look at Lean, if you keep stuffing more and more and more requirements into the sausage maker breaks down. And so if you actually stop that and you say, well, let's give it a nice flow of input into the sausage machine. If we're talking about people's sausage machine right now, then the output can be much more predictable. And then if you give them some time to actually do their, call it inspect and adapt, or do their learning cycles. But what I see is a lot of leaders say yes to the words, but then they keep throwing more and more and more and more on the table. And they sometimes even flat out refuse for the teams and the people to actually have any time to reflect. And if there's no, if they're overwhelmed with work and stressed out with work, and if you're in a stress mindset, you're not going to be creative. And if you don't have any breathing space to improve the situation, well, yeah, then we're down that traditional suffering path, I guess. So
yeah. It looks like a little bit a story of two steps ahead, one back, or I would say one back, one forward, and then two backs. This is the problem. I mean, as soon as there is kind of a crisis or a difficult moment, they immediately fall back on the traditional one. Oh, let's do this. You have to do this. They basically cut any kind of autonomy. And so this goes back, frankly, to the top management. The companies I have in mind that are really, really advanced in Agile is because the CEO has put not Agile, but the fact to become more Agile, that is different, as in his agenda, one of the probably top 3 or 4 objectives. At that moment, the message is sent to the other level of leadership, and they know that they expect. If this is not happening this way, that nothing is going to happen. That's why I really, kind of disagree with people say, oh, Agile is a kind of bottom-up, process that no. If bottom-up goes till a certain point, you get two Agile teams, and the stops there. And we know from research that if you just implement Agile teams, you're going to have a very small increase in productivity, because everything else stays the same, and all the advantage you get at team level are going to be basically counteracted by all the other rigidity that the company has. So it's really, as you say, mindset that must start from the top. Otherwise, basically, it's just a gimmick or a small improvement for part of the business anyway.
No, I'm curious, Luca. I'm wondering if you agree with this. In my experience, the CEOs, and maybe there's 3 types of them. There's some that, in their essence, already believe this for some reason. Meaning they're already into delegating. They're already into cross-functional teams. They're already into learning quickly. So this is kind of in their nature. And then those ones can adopt Agile pretty quickly. Then on the other side, there's some that I think are, just as a person, so different from that. And then in between, there's some that I think use the words a lot, but then they still default back in crisis and stuff. So there's something in between. But have you ever seen a executive that is innately traditional thinking be converted to Agile? Like is that even possible, or is it at some point does the executive just need to change?
Okay, so if you talk about a CEO, no, I don't think so. I mean, if she doesn't want, nothing's going to change. A lower level, I mean, immediately the C level, yes, I saw them, and the reason is very simple. That as a human being, as you know, better than anybody else, we do what we we are, rewarded for. And so it's easy as that. If the agile increment increase is somehow is gonna the C level is gonna be rewarded or measured by, something is gonna happen. Does he believe in it or not, or does she believe in it or not, is less important at this stage, at the beginning, till she or he gets the first results. And then he starts understanding that indeed there is some kind of big potential here that is going to basically improve the performance of the division or country, whatever it is. I didn't really believe that, I never believed that you can force people to do something they don't want to. But certainly, one of the best way to do it is definitely put in their end of the year goal, and this is as simple as that. I've seen a lot of I talk with a lot of C-level country manager, whatever, and say, you know what? Even if I want to introduce agile, I'm gonna fight. Especially these are talking about large company organization. I'm going to fight, for example, the rewarding system that we have at international level. So and if I want to, for example, reward the team work and team contribution, and I want to change the percentage, because now maybe 80% is individual performance and 20 just the team performance. If I want to switch to 80-20 the other way, I cannot, because I have very strict directive from the center. So even if I won't be able. At a certain point, I have to, limit my potential because of the structure. So this is why it's important that the CEO is really in it. Absolutely. There is I got to this conclusion that if it's not the case, it's going to really be difficult.
Mm. And I'm thinking, how can we bring this very practical? Because I know, and maybe we can talk about it, that you're have developed and are refining an agile leadership program that individuals can check into. So if they're not going to attend the university that you could be their professor at, they can also, get access to this directly. What I'd love to leave people with is, what are 2 or 3 very practical things that if they want to step into this agile and principled leadership world away from traditional, what are some of those just very practical things they can do today, and what would they expect if they were to embark on an agile leadership program with you?
Well, this is a great question, Chris, and thank you for asking me. The point is, I would say I would organize the answer in 3 steps. So the first one is really about understanding the reality. The first problem is really that leaders now more and more have difficulties in understanding the reality, because they are dragged down by all these assumptions that they have to have the answer. They basically, if they ask around, they're gonna look like they're weak leaders, or they're delegating the teams more than they think is right. All these things are definitely kind of basically limiting their evolution. So the first thing is to understand that, check really kind of list, and of course in the course or other material I've done on LinkedIn, for example, there's a list of obsolete assumptions that you have to be sure not to follow. Okay, you have to be sure to abandon completely because they are damaging to you. This is about understanding. The second step is about making decision. And making decision, once you have understood the situation, making decision is getting more and more difficult, means that we have to make decision in a different way. And one of the very practical approach that I encourage everyone to follow is really to think in a systematic way, or system thinking, meaning really see the entire articulation of the problem, all the implication of the problematic you have under your eyes, and not limit yourself to say, I'm going to solve this part of the project, the problem, because it's my part, where I'm in charge of. Because this is a very short-sighted way of solving problem, because what is going to happen is the problem is going to come back to you as a boomerang, okay, multiplied by 10, because somewhere else in the rest of the ecosystem you insert, and clearly your solution is crushed with their problematic. So basically, you're not solving anything, you're multiplying your problems, and you're just making yourself more miserable. So system thinking would see all the entire problematic before making any decision, because this is the way things works now. There's no silos in terms of problematic. The entire problem must be seen, understood, eventually collaborate to find solution with others. Don't limit to your small task. Sorry. And the last point is about executing. Executing is really about managing the team, the agile teams we are talking here, and definitely in a way or with the principle of agile team, meaning be sure that you be absolutely clear about what. So of course you're the leader, you set what they have to work on, but be two things. First of all, absolutely open to let them decide by themselves how to get there. Okay, you are not an expert, you don't know all the passage. And the other interesting thing is that they move based on the interaction with the final client. So it could be consumer, it could be an internal client, whatever. They have really these interactions. So they are much more aware and knowledgeable than you about if what they are producing is going the right direction or not. So let them do the how, absolutely. And the last point is, apart of letting them do the how, be the one that really help them to solve, dedicate part of your time to solve their problems, the problems they cannot solve by themselves because they are bigger than their level, okay? So not being a kind of telling them everything, but be a kind of enabler, okay? That's why we also talk enablers as a network. We love to work for them, for us, because this is the idea. We enable, as a leader, we enable teams to give their best. They're going to come up with something that you never thought about, you cannot never imagine, and this is something we have to apply daily, and refrain from getting back to the old traditional approach, meaning taking back all the decision making power whenever there is kind of little stress or pressure in times. This is going to send a message to your team that you are not serious about that.
Great. And the first of those 3 steps, which was, check your assumptions. We already talked about a couple of those, like the assumption that the leader needs to know all the answers and the assumption that everybody else needs to develop. I think those are 2 great places to start. And if a leader is looking to develop themselves, then talking with you and embarking on the Agile Leadership Program could be a great place for that to start, I think, as well. The reason I love personally what you're doing, Luca, is my roles when I'm in organizations are in technical or digital leadership roles. And that's right at the line between, call it the traditional software Scrum world or Agile or scaled Agile. And it's always rubbing up against the rest of the organization, call it the commercial organization that's just approaching life from such a different way. And my job is very often translating messages from 2 completely different worlds. And quite frankly, it's exhausting. And there's always the dream of, well, wait, what if the salespeople and the support people talking to customers actually approached the product strategy and product marketing people in a way which is inclusive and respectful, and the product people, brought the needs of whatever they're building for whoever they're building it, to the people who do it. And that could be physical engineering, they're building houses, it's and if you get that intimacy from your customers' needs straight through your organization, it can just be so much more fun. much less, less suffering. It's just, in the few times that I've really seen that click is, it's just fun, and you walk around with curiosity and Deloitte, and people are coming up with solutions to problems in ways that you would never even have imagined. You're just like, oh my God, I'm so blessed just to have that person here doing what they're doing. And even though you don't even know what they're doing, really, they're solving that problem. So you don't have to. It's absolutely lovely. Luca, how can people best find you? Because it's LinkedIn, but if someone is like inspired and they're like, oh wow, I want to eat some of this from Luca. I want some of this beautiful meal. What's the best way to get in touch?
The contact point is really LinkedIn. Nowadays, really, I concentrate everything there because everything else is much less visible. So if you just join my page on LinkedIn, and of course you can follow me if you're interested. You can get in touch with me. I'm absolutely interested to get in touch with all of you and try to keep on with my mission, that is Chris. Also, mission is to help people to kind of advance and reduce the suffering they live in this crazy world we are living in today.
Yeah, I love it. And I'll put Luca's LinkedIn link on the show notes. So wherever you're listening to this, just click through and you can find him there. I'll also put a link to Enablers Network, which Luca and I are both part of. Yeah. And I'll just do a plug for that as well, that if you are in a larger organization and you want to go transform a group of leaders, and you might like Luca and I, for example, to come in and work with you on doing that. That's also something we do with absolute delight and pleasure. I'll put the link on there as well. So Luca, thank you so much for joining. It's been wonderful.
My pleasure, Chris. Really, thank you for this. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Visit ebullient.com to download the Simple Business Design Framework. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player.